Hola estudiantes, hoy estamos hablando de los imperativos y los cambios de raíz.
Or if you're maybe coming to this video because you have some trouble with Spanish, welcome back to our channel, IB Learning. And today we're going to talk about Spanish conjugation, specifically how to do stem change verbs and how to conjugate verbs that are in the imperative or command tense.
Alright, let's get cracking on some conjugations. If you're new to Spanish class, you're probably wondering, what are stem change verbs? Now, stem change verbs are AR, ER, and IR verbs that experience a change in their stem, which is the way they are spelled, when they appear in a specific tense, such as the present tense, the past tense, or the future tense. Now today, we are just going to be discussing the the present tense verbs, so as not to overwhelm you. So here I've compiled a list of some common stem change verbs, and so I'm going to just tell you the verbs and what they mean, and then we will discuss how they are conjugated when they have a stem change. So here's verbs that undergo the E to IE stem change. You have querer, which means to want, cerrar, which means to close, mentir, which means to lie, and perder, which means to lose. Now, next we have the O to UE category of stem changes. You have soñar, which means to dream, almorzar, which means to eat lunch, costar, which means to cost, and demostrar, which means to demonstrate. And finally, we have some E to I stem change verbs, which include repetir, which means to repeat, conseguir, which means to get, decir, which means to say, and servir, which means to serve, like at a restaurant.
Now that you know some examples of stem change verbs and what they are, let's get into how to actually conjugate them using the stem change rules.
Vámonos! So today we decided to start with an easy ER verb, querer, which means to want. Now, the first thing you want to do, since querer is appearing in the yo form, is you want to drop the ER and change it to an O. But you probably already know that because that's Spanish 1 conjugation. Now here's where the stem change, which is higher level, comes in. You take the E in quiero and change it to an IE to make the word quiero. And congratulations, because you've just done your first stem change. Now, the correctly conjugated sentence is yo quiero una hamburguesa. The next verb we chose is an AR verb, soñar, which means to dream. And so, the first thing you want to do, since it's appearing in the he form, the L form, is change it to soñar and drop the R. So then, here's the higher level Spanish. You want to change the O to a UE for your stem change, because O changes to UE in stem change verbs. AR stem change verbs specifically. And so now the completed sentence is él sueña en la noche, and that is a correctly conjugated sentence. Finally, to demonstrate E to I, we chose decir. Now the first thing you want to do, since this appears in the ellos form, is to drop the IR and change it to an E. But that's Spanish 1, and then the stem change comes into play. You take the E and you change it to an I, and there's a very simple stem change for an IR verb. Ellos dicen la verdad, conjugated correctly, means they say the truth. Finally, just an important thing to remember about stem changes is that this doesn't apply to nosotros and vosotros forms of the words. In fact, there is no stem change here in decir when it changes to decimos in the nosotros form. La segunda cosa que estamos hablando de hoy es los imperativos o mandatos. These are imperatives or commands. In Spanish, when you're trying to tell someone that they have to do something and you're making a demand, like do this, eat this, or say this, in that case, you need to use an imperative. Now, imperatives have special conjugations depending on who you're talking to and what verb you are using.
So these are the basic steps to use to conjugate the imperative form except with the positive to command. That's a different case which we'll explain later. The basic steps is that you start with the yo form of the verb. This is to take into account things that might have irregular yo form, such as hacer, which has the yo form of hago with a G, which isn't found in the infinitive. Second, you will drop the O. This means you're just going to take off that conjugated ending because of the yo until you're left with just the base. In the case of hacer, you would now be left with H-A-G, ag, instead of algo. Then you switch the endings. This means that if the verb was originally an AR verb, you would now use the ER endings to conjugate it. So for example, if you were talking about ustedes, instead of using AN as you typically would, you would now use EN and add it on to the stem that you already had. This also is the same with ER and IR verbs. You would now use the AR endings instead of the original ones.
First, we're going to explore using the positive imperative. This is when you want someone to do something so bad that you demand them to do it. We are going to use an easy verb, hablar, to show you how things are conjugated positively.
Okay, so in order to conjugate this imperatively, we're going to take the verb hablar and put it in the yo form. All we're doing is simply conjugating it like we normally would with the O in the ending. Next, what we're going to do is drop the O. So we are now left with hable. Now, in order to finish the conjugation, this is an AR verb, which means for you said, we normally would end it with an A. But because we have to switch the endings with the ER and IR verbs, now we are going to use the E that we typically do. So the final conjugation is hable.
And that would be usted hable. The AR verb with the to command is a bit easier than the usted command. Basically, it's the same as the present tense el, ella, usted, where you simply drop the R. So it goes from to hablar to habla. And what you are literally saying is, you speak.
This chart can help summarize when you should use what protocol for conjugating positive and negative imperatives. You'll notice that there's no conjugation for yo imperatives because it doesn't make sense to command yourself to do something. El, ella, and usted, as well as ustedes and ellos forms and nosotros forms all have the same pattern of conjugation. If you're having a positive imperative or you're telling someone to do something, you just use the switch protocol that we already discussed. If you want to tell them not to do something, it's that same conjugation, you just add a no before the verb. For to, that is the exception that we already previously discussed, where the positive only uses the typical el, ella, and usted form. No switch is used here. However, for a negative to command, you do use the switch with a no in front of it. Vosotros is more uncommon, it's only used in Spain, but in case it comes up, there are some exceptions for this rule. Positive imperative will be the infinitive verb minus the R and then a D. So for the verb hablar, it would be hablad. And the no goes back to the typical procedure of no and a switch.
Okay. Next, we're going to talk about negative imperatives, which is when you really don't want someone to do something. So you say, do not do this. So we are going to use hablar again because that's one of the easier AR verbs. And we're going to say, do not speak to several different people. Conjugating the negative imperative is not too different from conjugating the positive one. The main difference is in the to command. When you say, do not talk, you say, no hables. You switch out the AR and replace it with an E in all of the words.
These are the examples of the verbs that have irregular conjugation in the imperative form. This means that you can't follow the rules that we've already discussed in this video for these specific verbs. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see a list of verbs that have irregulars in the to form. This just means that whenever you're conjugating these in the to form, you have to use these conjugations. You don't have to add any other endings or change them further than what you see listed here. Some of them have irregulars in the positive form, the negative form, or one of the other. The rest of the conjugations for other subjects such as yo or ella and other ones are normal according to the rules. On the right hand side, there are some more irregular verbs for the usted and ustedes forms. These follow the same guidelines that we just discussed, where those conjugations listed there are the ones we use in the circumstances when that verb, that subject, and that command occurs.
Gracias por mirando y aprendiendo.
Thanks for watching. We hope you learned something about conjugating Spanish stem change verbs and imperative forms. We hope to see you next time.
Adios, estudiantes.
Bailando.